Welcome to Upping Your Parenting Game for Your Alienated Child. My name is Lisa Rothfuss, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker here in Austin, Texas, with over 35 years of experience working with children and families. I specialize in reunification therapy and working with alienation issues. I even offer a 4-day intensive program for children who have been severely alienated from their parents. I've worked for 9 years in the Texas family court system as a guardian ad litem, a court-appointed therapist, and a co-parent counselor, and I'm a board member for Family Access. Parenting really changes dramatically when you get separated or divorced. Now you move into a stage of co-parenting together, and each of you have your own style. One of you may be more structured, the other more flexible. You may have different thoughts about education, extracurriculars, phones, video games, money, or any of the other millions of things that you have to deal with when you're raising a child. Sometimes when you're together living in the same house, you can negotiate a middle ground with your parenting styles. Or one parent just gives in to the other parent's style. For some people, this is even one of the main reasons they get divorced. After the separation or divorce, parents seem less motivated to negotiate. It's often impossible to come up with a middle ground. In fact, I've found that after a divorce, parents dig in even deeper with their parenting style, feeling that it is the best for the children. After a divorce, the stakes are higher, and keeping a relationship with your child becomes more important than ever. What if you're stricter than your ex? Kids don't normally like rules, even though they are good for them. Are your kids going to stop wanting to come to your house? What if your ex uses your strictness to drive a wedge between you and your kids? It would be nice to think that parents would put aside their differences and act like adults, but what if they don't? I see this in my practice nearly every single day. A co-parent who has had their child or children alienated from them because their parenting style was different than their ex's. How did it happen? Who's responsible? More importantly, how does your parenting style affect your relationship with your child? The way you previously parented your child is blowing up in your face, and your child said they don't want to see you anymore. But you can fix this. You have to put a lot of work into it, and it's not going to happen overnight, but there are things that you can do. So my goal today is to help you understand what is happening, avoid the minefield of issues that keep coming up because of your current co-parenting style, and work towards changing your parenting style to avoid excessive conflicts and disruptions. So let's start with the story. This is a story of a dad and his 2 children. He wasn't divorced yet, but he was living out of the family home. But a divorce was inevitable. He came to talk to me about how his relationship with his children since the separation wasn't going very well. He was having some parenting time with his children, a 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl, but his son was refusing to go to his house. And recently, his daughter had been saying she also didn't want to go to his house. They also didn't want him to come to their activities, and they refused to spend time with his parents. The son had a lot of poor excuses. He didn't like Dad's new apartment. It's too small, it smelled funny, too far from his school. He didn't like leaving Mom alone all by herself. Dad wanted them to do chores at his house. He yells and he gets angry when they don't follow his rules. He liked being at his old house better. He could play video games as long as he wanted at Mom's house. And he felt that Mom is the one who always really takes care of him and understands how he feels. He made comments like, "Mom didn't want this divorce, you did. You don't give Mom enough money to pay the bills. You're going to take the house and make Mom live in an apartment. So, who's really speaking here? When the kids did come over, he said, they don't listen to me. They don't want to eat at the table. They don't want to engage in any activities. And they usually beg to leave early. They spend most of their time talking and texting on the phone to their mom. And she told the kids that if they were having a hard time at his house, she would come and get them if they wanted her to. He felt he never got any time alone with his kids, and their mother was always interrupting their time. Dad became increasingly frustrated with this situation. He insisted he was the parent, and they would come to his house when it was his parenting time, and they would follow his rules. Now, as often happens in this kind of high conflict divorces, the dad began to feel the shift in power in the parenting role between himself and his soon-to-be ex-wife. He began to realize that whatever he said was not carrying any authority anymore in the eyes of his children. They knew Mom would just come and get them if they didn't like being at his house or his rules, and they would leave. This left him feeling powerless and angry. Well, the relationship got worse with him and his son. And so, not knowing what to do, Dad stopped pushing his son to come to his house. But when his daughter started refusing to come, he drew the line at losing the relationship with her as well. So one summer day, Dad went to the pool to pick up his daughter from swim practice and take her back to his house. His soon-to-be ex, his daughter's mother, was there, but watching from a distance. He approached the daughter saying, "It's time to go," reaching for her. His daughter began to raise her voice loudly saying, "I don't want to go with you. I don't like going to your house. I want to stay with my brother and Mom." He got busily frustrated with her, and he said, "It's my parenting time and you're coming with me." He went to grab her arm and take her to the car. But as he did this, his son stepped in front of his sister and said, "She's afraid of you and she doesn't want to go with you. And she doesn't have to go with you if she doesn't want to." The dad said, "Stay out of it. This is an issue between me and your sister. You need to back off. You're not the parent here." But he didn't back off. In fact, he continued to yell at his dad and finally pushed him away. Dad was stunned and angry that he pushed him and tired of arguing with his son. He finally reached out his hand and pushed his son out of the way so he could get to his daughter. When he did this, his son fell back and tripped over a pool toy behind him, falling to the ground and landing on his wrist. The son began to scream in front of everybody, "You pushed me down and hurt me. Stop abusing me and my sister. This is why we're afraid of you and we don't want to go to your house." His son was crying by now, and everybody was staring at them, and his son began running away from the pool. The dad said he felt really upset that his son had fallen down, and he went after them immediately. The mother and daughter had been standing at the side watching, but now they followed the dad and son too. When the dad caught up with his son, he tried to explain. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted you to stop interfering," he said to him. "If you would not have interfered, you wouldn't have gotten hurt." Well, this made the son even angrier at him, and he started to yell louder that he should just go away. He never wanted to see him again. Dad didn't know what to do at this point, but the situation was not getting better. So Mom finally told the dad to leave and let her handle it, which he did. But on his drive home, he felt so embarrassed and ashamed. He didn't mean to hurt his son, but he had to maintain discipline. He was the adult. He would never abuse his kids. How did this happen? What do I do? And then it got worse. The mother took the son to the police station the next day to file an abuse report against the father. Needless to say, the kids refused to go to his house after this incident. I wish I could say this is an uncommon story, but that wouldn't be the case. Every day, parents come into my office and tell me how they are being disconnected and estranged from their child once they separate and get divorced. And it often involves some incident in which the parent blew up at the child when feeling frustrated and disempowered by the situation. When I work with parents experiencing any stage of alienation with their children, I say to them, parenting a child who is becoming alienated from you is very different than parenting a child in which you have a secure attachment and an ongoing daily relationship. I tell them the parenting game has now changed on them, and they have to up their parenting game if they want to keep any kind of a relationship with their child. I tell them this situation will require improving your parenting skills, learning new strategies, and parenting with more awareness overall. I say, I know this doesn't feel fair, but if you don't change your response to your child's behavior, you will push them further into the alienating parent's narrative about you, how you don't know how to parent and you're an unsafe person to be around. The alienating parent is looking for a way to discredit you in your child's eyes. Don't give them the opportunity. So you're going to have to start parenting differently. I start talking to them about various parenting styles and how certain parenting styles can make a situation like this even worse. So in my presentation, I want to talk to you about a few important things that I think will help you. First, I want to talk about parenting styles and how they interact with each other in co-parenting situations and reviewing our story together. Second, let's talk about what's actually going on in your child's brain when you get in a conflict with your child, and use our story to understand that. And third, I want to talk about tools for actually fixing this. So let's talk about parenting styles. Basically, there are 6 kinds of parenting styles I would like to talk to you about today. First, authoritarian drill sergeant style, the permissive style, the uninvolved style, the helicopter parenting style, the free-range parenting style, and finally, the authoritative coaching parenting style. So let's talk about authoritarian drill sergeant parenting. These parents are clearly in charge, and children are expected to fall in line no matter what. It's less nurturing, more limits, and more rules. An authoritarian parent lacks flexibility because the overarching rule is, it's my way or the highway. This kind of style views respect as a one-way street. Children have to respect parents, but parents don't necessarily have to respect children. And this works better when children are younger, but begins to backfire big time when children get older. Permissive parenting style. This is a very nurturing style, but with few limits. Permissive parents want to be their child's best friend. And permissive parents also force children to make many choices, oftentimes before they're ready. If you always allow your child to do whatever they want, they will never understand that in the real world, there are consequences to their actions. And this is one of the styles often used by an alienating parent. In my story, Mom has a very nurturing, permissive style of parenting, allowing her son to do mostly what he wants. Uninvolved parents. Now, they're permissive, minus the nurturing. Uninvolved parents are completely hands-off. They're often distracted with their own life, their personal relationships, their work. If the child doesn't like something, they can do what they want, and the parent isn't there to encourage them to follow any rules. This style is also often used by an alienating parent. And the child likes this style because they are pretty much left to do whatever they want to do. Helicopter parenting. Helicopter parents want to protect their kids. They want to keep them happy, set them up for success so badly that they become over-involved in their lives, and they wind up micromanaging their child's life. Many of the alienating parents I work with have this parenting style, and they feel that they must be involved in every aspect of their child's life. They particularly don't like their children being at the other parent's home, where they feel the other parent can't really meet the needs appropriately of the children. They constantly give off signals to their children that they are better off at their home. As a result, these kids don't learn how to handle their own problems or withstand any kind of disappointment. It doesn't prepare the child for the real world, and it doesn't equip them with resiliency. Free-range parenting. Now, you might not have heard of this one quite so much, but in free-range parenting, there is somewhat of a permissive type of parenting style, but it can include plenty of rules and guidance. They trust kids to do more by themselves, thinking that they can handle these things. They believe they grow more resilient once they discover their own resourcefulness. But if parents apply it to a child who isn't ready for more independence, it can veer into a neglectful territory. This is another parenting style used by the alienating parent, which can be particularly dangerous, as it often empowers the child to feel they are more in charge than the adults. These kids often say, "I can do whatever I want." Authoritative coaching style. This parenting style enforces rules, but not without discussing them and the reasons behind them. Kids are welcome to provide input and ask questions, though they don't get the final say. Rather than telling them, "Just do as I say," you're able to have a dialogue, respond, be flexible. This is the sweet spot between authoritarian and permissive parenting. And research shows it strikes the best balance of all the parenting styles. So what's your style? Most cases I work on have parents with very different styles. And this puts a child in a difficult place once a divorce occurs. If one parent is more permissive and excessively nurturing, and another more structured, inflexible, or less empathetic, the child often gravitates towards the less permissive, more uninvolved, more free-range parenting style. And parenting styles often get accentuated in cases where alienation is occurring. If both parents don't encourage and require the child to stick with each parent's allotted time, alienation begins to creep in. What's your ex's parenting style? This is another important question to ask yourself. It's extremely important for you to understand your co-parent style. Only then can you understand the stresses on the children, what you need to do, what you need to change or improve upon if you are slowly being pushed away by your child. So let's talk about a few problematic pairings that I often see. Authoritarian parent versus the permissive parent. This is definitely the most common pairing I see that contributes to alienation and estrangement. This is problematic because the authoritarian parent feels it's harmful to the child to be given so much freedom around video games, bedtimes, homework, food choices. And they have little empathy for the child's complaints about this being different at the other parent's house, and usually inflexible about adjusting any rules. This is my house, and you're going to do as I say. Permissive parents use the authoritarian parent's rigidity against them with the children and overcompensate by being excessively nurturing and having very few rules. Permissive parents want to be their child's best friend, which they feel wins them favor with the child and makes their house the more comfortable house, more relaxed, more fun. Your dad just doesn't understand you kids. They constantly check on their children by text or phone when at the other parent's house to see if the other parent is being unreasonable, which they often label as abusive. Authoritarian versus helicopter parenting. Now, the authoritarian parent is very inflexible, as we talked about before, and more hands-off. And mistakes by the child are often met with fairly strict consequences, being excessively harsh or out of proportion to the misbehavior. And the child feels they have been unfairly treated and not listened to. The helicopter parent wants to protect their child from the harsh, critical parent and feels that the child's happiness and instant gratification of their needs is of primary importance. They will go out of their way to do things that the other parent wouldn't do because they don't really understand the child's needs the way they do. They become micromanager of their children's lives and at the time they spend, even with the other parent. Their over-involvement may take the form of excessive phone calls, texts, and things like, "Do you need anything? Didn't your dad take you to get new shoes? Don't worry, I'll do it when I come to pick you up." Authoritative versus uninvolved. Now, authoritative coaching parents, as we talked about, are more flexible. They do enforce rules, but not without discussing them and the reasons behind them. Kids can provide input and ask questions, but they don't make the final decision. Even though this is considered to be the most effective parenting style of all the ones we've discussed, it can even be problematic with an uninvolved parent. Their reasonable rules and discussions fall short of the uninvolved parent's reluctance to take a stand on any parenting issue, feeling the child should mostly do what they want, and their absence makes it too much trouble to rearrange their life and get more involved. Let them go to bed when they get tired. They'll be fine. Let them play video games if they want. What's the big deal? Uninvolved parents often are not physically or emotionally present with their children, being preoccupied with their work, their trips, their friends, their relationships with significant others, or struggling with issues such as drinking or severe depression. These kids come to really resent the authoritative parent having any rules and feel they don't need any adult helping them with their life choices. They've been on their own a lot. They don't need anyone telling them what to do now. If the authoritative parent doesn't do what they want, then they say, "You never listen to me," which really means you're not doing what I want you to do, and I don't want to be around you anymore. I like running my own life. So, what is the least effective parenting style for a parent whose children are being alienated from them? That would definitely be the authoritarian parent. What's the most effective style for a parent whose children are being alienated from them? That would be the authoritative coaching style. Now, the authoritative coaching style, this is the most appropriate style for parents who are being alienated. And rather than telling them what to do, You have conversations and dialogues with them around why they are upset with you, why they need to be at your home, why you need them to follow certain rules. They can feel comfortable to ask questions and bring their concerns to you if they are having issues and they don't understand things that are going on between the two homes. They can have a voice, but they don't get the final vote. Now, I'm not saying this style will totally prevent alienation issues from occurring, but I am saying it is your best option against losing your relationship with your child. So let's go back to the dad and the son and talk about our story again. Well, I think you can all figure out by now that the dad style is authoritarian and the mom style is permissive. And this, of course, is one of the worst pairings. So let's look at the dad's mistakes and see where he went wrong. Mistake number 1. When dad enters the swim practice area, he immediately becomes frustrated by the situation that he encounters with his daughter. And he begins acting aggressively with his daughter, saying, "It's my parenting time and you're going with me." He goes to grab her arm, take her to the car. This is the do what I say approach. Mistake number 2. Son steps in front of the dad. Dad puts his finger in the son's face and orders him in a loud, angry voice, "Stay out of it. This is an issue between me and your sister and you need to back off. You're not the parent here." Telling the child what he needs to do, acting aggressively with his words and his actions. Mistake number 3. Dad becomes physical, pushes the son away, and stumbles and falls. Now, the son did push the dad first, but what gets focused on is dad's pushing. This opened the door for the son to say, "Dad's hurting me, he's abusing me." This makes dad look very bad in the eyes of his children and everyone else around him. Mistake number 4. Dad lectures his son. He said to him, "If you would not have interfered, you wouldn't have gotten hurt." This made his son even angrier at him and yell louder. Why didn't this style work? This dad did not mean to hurt his son or his daughter, but he is used to telling his children what to do and having them do it. Now, this authoritarian style that he used in the marriage had worked pretty well previously for 2 reasons. First, the kids were younger, and you can get away with this style more when children are younger. And number 2, dad and mom were still living in the same house. The balance of power had not shifted so dramatically yet, and the children were still seeing both parents an equal amount of time. To understand why authoritarian parenting doesn't work, you have to look into the science behind this style. I have always had a passion for studying how the brain works in various kinds of situations. And I often try to weave a little bit of this information into my therapy sessions to help parents and kids understand more about how the brain works under circumstances. So let's talk about what's happening in the brain. What's going on inside your kid's head? Often, our parenting responses have been so ingrained in us and are so automatic that we've never thought about why a particular style isn't working. But if you understand more about the science behind the developing brain and how it works, you can begin to adjust your parenting skills to accommodate your child's behavior. So let's talk about what happens to a child's brain when someone acts aggressively, or shows aggressive body language, or lectures them, or orders them to do something, threatens them. Well, interestingly enough, we now have technology called fMRI scans that can show what is actually happening in the brain when a person is extremely emotionally dysregulated. So, with the brain, you have an upstairs part of your brain and a downstairs part of your brain. And right in the center, you have a little part of the brain that looks like a walnut called the amygdala. When a child gets incredibly emotionally dysregulated, the downstairs brain hijacks the upstairs brain and triggers what we call the emotional amygdala hijack. The amygdala is primarily associated with emotional processes in the brain. And it's hard to imagine that such a tiny part of the brain is where we process our biggest emotions. For instance, anything that is fearful and threatening. And the brain becomes flooded with cortisol when it's hijacked, and it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So let's go back to our story. In this case, Dad's body language and words were both threatening and fearful to his daughter and son. The dad didn't have a lot of insight into his parenting, and he didn't realize that by engaging in this authoritarian behaviors, he was actually igniting the part of the children's brain that signaled fear and threat. We call this brain on fire, and it produces fight, flight, or freeze response in the brain. The daughter freezes, the son both fights and flees. So cortisol is now running through their brain. It's very difficult for them to calm down, and the more the dad talks, the more emotionally overloaded his son becomes. Particularly if that talking takes the form of lecturing and ordering and threats, because it feels like a threat to the brain. The lecturing the dad did when he caught up with his son only caused his son's brain to become even more agitated. Brain on fire. When a child is emotionally dysregulated, this is not a time to teach or redirect a child, and it really backfired on the father. Because a child can't take in our teaching or redirection if the lower part or the reptilian part of the brain is on fire. And there was another interesting discovery made in the 1990s about mirror neurons. You might have heard of these. The scientists studied what happens in the brain when two people are interacting and they become emotional with each other. They learned that mirror neurons are a type of brain cell that respond equally when we perform an action and when we witness someone else perform the action. Researchers found that we mirror each other's expressions and emotions. What does this mean to a parent and a child that are having a conflict? Well, if you are very emotionally upset, frustrated, angry, aggressive, then your child will often mirror these emotions and respond similarly. In this case, the dad came into the swim practice frustrated, then angry, then aggressive, and his son quickly took on a defensive, angry posture and tone with the dad. They were mirroring each other's emotions. Dad's brain had become brain on fire, and the child had become brain on fire. And they couldn't calm themselves down. What could this dad have done differently with his son? Well, that's where parenting with more awareness would have been very helpful to this father. The dad would have understood that if his son is very upset, he needs to respond with a calm, matter-of-fact manner. If he stays calmer, his son will stay calmer and mirror his more calm emotional state. He would know that if he becomes agitated with his son, this will lead to fight, flight, or freeze, and he can steer the interaction away from this kind of conflict. You can fix it. Well, I'd like to offer you some solutions about how to fix some of these things. And I'm going to talk about 3 important tools that you can use to help. But these don't exist alone, and these 3 aren't a fix-all. Also, things aren't going to change immediately. These things will take some time. You're going to have to work with them a little bit and get used to using them. Solution number 1. Lead with empathy and awareness. Your mantra should be empathy before everything else. Empathy before anything else. No matter what parenting strategy or philosophy you believe in or you follow, you have to start with empathy first. Let's look again at the neuroscience behind why you should start with empathy. When was the last time you got into a conflict with your child? How much empathy did you show your child? Did you use anger, lectures, threats? Empathetic listening calms the brain. Empathetic listening or touch is one of the few things that have a healing impact on the brain on fire. It leads to calming down the heart rate, the nervous system, and supporting emotional regulation. When we listen and we respond empathetically to our children, various areas of the brain are calmed. These areas are called the medulla and the amygdala. You need to calm this part of your child's brain down if you want to have any kind of interaction with them. That is parenting with awareness. And before we even talk about empathetic words, you need to become aware of your nonverbal communication. Start becoming aware of what your child sees you doing, not just what you say to your child. When you need to address a child's misbehavior, pay attention to your nonverbal cues. Research shows that children pay more attention to nonverbal than verbal communication. What is your facial expression saying? What is your body language saying? Put your body in a non-threatening posture, often at or below a child's eye level when you're trying to talk with them. And let's talk about some empathetic statements that you can make to a child. I can see how upset you are right now. It validates them. I understand this is frustrating for you. I know this is confusing for you. I'm sorry this happened. I'd like to help you if I can. Let's see if we can solve this together. You can take these, put them up on stickers, leave them around your house. Start teaching yourself these words and these phrases to share with your children. The important thing about your nonverbal and your verbal is that you need to switch your child from the reactive brain to the more receptive brain. And empathy gives all parenting techniques this power. It lessens the negative impact on an event. Think about connect, then redirect. Move them out of the reactive brain to the receptive mode in the brain. This calms the nervous system, and it can be done with a gentle touch or empathetic words or statements. Empathetic touching or listening switches the brain from the reactive mode to the receptive mode, literally shutting down fight, flight, or freeze. But a raised voice, an angry face, yelling, harsh words, that raises the cortisol level. It prevents a child from switching into the receptive mode and causes fight, flight, or freeze. So let's take a crash course in empathy. Look at your awareness checklist. What is your facial expression saying? What is your body language saying? Have you used empathetic touch? Have you used empathetic statements? Have you used empathetic listening, responding back to the child? So what's the first thing parents need to do differently? Empathy first. Let's go back to the story. If Dad had started with empathy for his daughter, she might not have been feeling so frightened or scared. This whole event would probably have gone differently. First, Dad could have noticed when he was getting angry or frustrated. He could have softened his posture, noticed his nonverbal communication, not stand in a threatening stance over his daughter and try to grab her arm. Drop below eye level, and talk with his daughter. Look up at her. He could have led with empathetic statements. I can see you're feeling kind of upset right now. Why don't you finish your swim practice? I'll wait over here. We can talk later. This is a less threatening approach and would have calmed her brain down. Now, the dad doesn't have to totally leave, but he also doesn't have to keep aggressively pushing his agenda either. If he had been less aggressive with his daughter, I think the son would not have felt so compelled to overreact and protect his sister. Dad and son's angry, frustrated emotions mirrored each other, and this quickly escalated the situation. So that is solution number one. Lead with empathy. Solution number two, shared dignity. So let's go back to our story for a moment. At the end of the big conflict between Dad and his son, you might remember that Dad ended up feeling ashamed and embarrassed by his behavior. He was so upset and frustrated that he ended up crying and running away. So what else could this dad have done differently to avoid getting into this power struggle? How can you avoid having major power struggles with your child that don't leave you feeling angry, upset, frustrated by your own behavior? Let's talk about what happens in the misbehavior cycle. In the misbehavior cycle, an adult shows anger and frustration at the child, much like Dad did as he entered the swim practice and was angry at both his son and his daughter. Consequently, they both began to misbehave immediately. And because of the misbehavior, they all ended up feeling very badly about themselves. And the situation begins again. One of the most important principles to remember about parenting is that anger, frustration, lecturing, and threats fuel unwanted negative behavior. You have to become aware when power struggles are about to occur. Ask, am I repeatedly getting into a power struggle with my child? If you are, stop. Start examining your own behavior and ask yourself, what do I really have the most control over? Do I really have control over my child's behavior? How they choose to respond in a particular situation? Do I have control over their emotions? How they choose to feel about a particular situation? And if you're really being honest with yourself, you'll know that you don't actually have control over those things. The thing you have the most control over is your own behavior. So, authoritative parents set firm limits in loving ways without anger, frustration, lectures, or threats. And the truth about power and control is that nobody wins a power struggle. Nobody feels good when they're in a power struggle. And somebody's got to break the cycle. And that has got to be you as the parent. So the dad from our story, he needed to find a new way to talk to his children that did not include anger, frustration, lecturing, and threats, all of which he did use. And that would prevent the misbehavior cycle from starting. So, important parenting principle. Never tell a stubborn child or teen what to do. Instead, describe what you're willing to do or allow. One of the most important strategies is using enforceable statements. What's the message to your child if you tell a stubborn child what to do and they don't comply? They learn that your words are meaningless. But there is so much power in enforceable statements. When you set limits with enforceable statements, you enjoy the benefit of always being able to follow through on your words. Authoritative parents know they can turn their words into gold with enforceable statements. Enforceable statements often start with, "I'd be happy to take you to your friend's house as soon as you finish cleaning your room." Allow kids to play on the computer once their homework is done. I do extra things for kids who are respectful and kind to me. I allowed a teenager to have a phone if they are doing well with their grades in school. When a parent learns to take charge of their own words, actions, and behaviors, they can parent with more dignity and avoid having so many power struggles with their children. They feel better about their choices and helps prevent embarrassment about their own behavior. But just as important, they can help their children feel better about themselves by not allowing the misbehavior cycle to get started. So, what could this dad in our story have done differently? Well, he could have avoided a power struggle with his son and daughter, avoid the misbehavior cycle, help himself and his son have a better interaction that didn't leave them both feeling so angry and frustrated by first avoiding getting into the misbehavior cycle to begin with, staying calm himself. And second, the dad could have tried some enforceable statements like, "I can see you're both really upset right now. I'm going to go sit in the car, let you finish your swim practice. I'll talk more about this when you're done and you're feeling a little better. I'll come back a little later." Or, "I love you too much to argue with you. I'll talk with your mom and set up another time for us to see each other tomorrow." In both examples, the dad is saying what he will do, not what the children will do. The most important thing to remember is that no one wins a power struggle. Having negative interactions with your children will not make them want to spend more time with you and will not build the relationship. If your child is being more severely alienated, what should you do? If the situation has moved towards more severe alienation, then the dad is probably going to need more professional help and support to work this out with his children. But the last thing he wants to do is to continue to engage in negative interactions over and over and over again with his children. He should still try to use these tools to help avoid these negative interactions. And anything you can do to stay out of conflict is going to help you and your child. Solution number 3, shared control with choices. Let's go back to our story again. When this dad marched into the swim practice and wanted his daughter to go with him right then and there, his demanding behavior caused her to experience a sense of loss of control over her situation, trapping her, making her feel put in a corner. His daughter was probably already experiencing loss of control over having to go to dad's house when her brother could stay with mom and didn't have to go to dad's house. So the second most important principle to remember about parenting is, when we try to hoard control, we lose it. When we share control, we gain it. Authoritative parents know to offer choices and alternatives instead of orders. Why give choices? Well, when you give children choices, they have more of a sense of control over their own lives. This reduces power struggle and it increases their sense of self-confidence. So what's the strategy for helping kids make choices? Well, always give 2 choices you can live with and give a child a little time to decide. And if they don't decide, you can say, okay, that's all right, I'll decide for you today. So here's some ideas of choices, particularly for parents who are struggling with issues of alienation. The child's already resistant about going to your house. So you might say something like, would you rather go out to dinner tonight or make your favorite dinner at home? Would you rather choose a movie to go to or choose a movie for us to watch at my house? Would you rather take a break from your video games before dinner, after dinner? Would you like to call your mom before dinner or before you go to bed? Now remember, when using choices, only give choices that fit your value system and give lots of choices when things are going well. You want to avoid using this particular strategy when you're in the middle of conflicts with children. So you want to do this before they become resistant. And don't describe threats as choices. Do it now or I won't take you to your mother's house. So what can Dad do differently? Well, first, Dad needs to calm down and not force the situation at the moment when his daughter's brain is in fight, flight, or freeze. And second, he could talk calmly to her, offer her some choices to see how she responds. He could say something like, would you like to get ice cream or a hamburger and French fries before we go back to my house? Or, would you like me to come back in about 30 minutes to pick you up and take you to dinner wherever you'd like? Or, you could have dinner with Mom and your brother and I can come and get you a little bit later. Now, this approach gives her much more control over the little things like where to eat or changing the time a little bit, but ultimately still reinforces the big picture, which is that she's going to be going to Dad's. So let's summarize the 3 solutions for staying connected that we've talked about today. Lead with empathy before everything, because this calms the brain. Share dignity. Change your parenting style to authoritative coaching style. This will help you to stay out of the misbehavior cycle that you can get in with your children. And you can remember that you have the most control over your own behavior. Shared control through choices. Help kids develop more of a sense of control over their situation by allowing them to make choices about smaller things. And keep focusing on the positives about your child despite the disrespect, the unkind behavior, and see the very best in them. And don't blame your child. You may be frustrated or confused by your child's behavior if they're being alienated. And as we know, a parent's response can be to be harsh, critical, angry. This is going to push your child further away. Children who live in prolonged toxic stress in high conflict families are just trying to survive, and their behavior won't always make sense. So strategies like these will help you to avoid widening the gap between you and your child if you think your child is being alienated. By upping your parenting game, you are giving you and your child the best possible chance to stay connected. Well, we've been at this for under an hour. That was a lot of information for you to absorb. And to make real changes in your parenting style, it's going to take more time and more effort. It's going to require a little bit more work. You're probably going to need some help to do it. to reinforce these things for yourself. So I'd like to offer you some pointers, other resources you could use to continue to work on these strategies and skills. One of the best resources out there is Parenting with Love and Logic. For over 43 years, Jim and Charles Fay have been teaching parenting strategies to both parents and educators. They have created proven, practical, psychological-based methods for teaching parents strategies for establishing healthy relationships with their children without anger, threats, nagging, or power struggles. These strategies are also particularly good for helping parents that are becoming alienated from their children. Many of the techniques we talked about today are taught in Love and Logic. And Love and Logic is a coaching, authoritative style of parenting. It requires you to look at your own behavior first, parenting with awareness, making changes in your own parenting strategies because it needs to start with you. Begin to change the repetitive negative cycles of behavior between you and your child before this causes a permanent disconnection. 2 key principles of Love and Logic. Number 1, adults set firm limits in loving ways without anger, lectures, or threats. Never tell a stubborn child or teen what to do. Instead, tell them what you're willing to do or allow. And number 2, when you try to hoard control, you lose it. And when you share control, you gain it. Jim and Charles have created numerous Love and Logic resources to help you with your parenting skills. They have many, many books that have sold over 900,000 copies on Amazon for you to look at. And you could also check out their website, www.loveandlogic.com, which is a tremendous source of information for both parents and educators. And there are numerous YouTube videos that they do that you can watch as well. There are also many professionals who offer Love and Logic classes, and you can look around town for those. One of the best resources is the online parenting class that teaches Love and Logic, and I often ask my parents to go take this. Start with a Love and Logic website, or just do a Google search online for Love and Logic classes. Beyond Love and Logic, I would recommend a few more books. One of them is When Kids Leave You Speechless. Now, this is written by Jim and Charles Fay, but this is one of my favorite books because it's like a resource book for how to handle specific problems as a parent. We don't have time always to look up a whole lot of information and read a lot of books. But in this book, you can actually go look for the specific thing or issue you're having with your child, like swearing, or inflammatory statements like, I hate you, you don't love me, or not completing your chores. You can look in this book and it will give you ideas and suggestions and strategies on how to handle these situations. And if you're interested in more about your child's brain, check out these books. Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson have written 2 wonderful books called The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline. Dan Siegel is a neuropsychiatrist, an author of many books, and a parenting expert. He has written a revolutionary approach to child rearing with 12 key strategies that foster healthy brain development. And some good sources dealing with alienation are Surviving Parental Alienation, A Journey of Hope and Healing by Amy Baker. When Parents Hurt, this is a compassionate strategies when you and your grown children can't get along. And that's by Joshua Coleman. Or Restoring Family Connections, Helping Targeted Parents and Adult Alienated Children Work Through Conflicts, Improve Communication, and Enhance Relationships by Amy Baker. Thanks so much for joining me today. Feel free to contact me at contact@lisarothfuss.com or my website, lisarothfuss.com, or my phone number, 512-643-2851. And check out my YouTube videos, including What Alienated Children Won't Tell You, and my videos on reunification and alienated parent issues. I'm Lisa Rothfuss, and this has been Upping Your Parenting Game for Your Alienated Child.